sky darkened suddenly, and a fierce wind whipped across the barren plains of Clythar. 7. Kale pulled his worn jacket tight around his shoulders as he struggled to keep his footing. The planet's storms were famous among the colonies for their sudden violence, and Kale had learned early not to underestimate them. He was alone, far from any settlement, in a small, self-built hut that served as both shelter and workshop. A small solar panel rig had been knocked loose by the wind earlier, and Kale was desperately trying to repair it when the first streaks of lightning tore across the sky. The air smelled of ozone, sharp and electric. Tail's hands shook as he tightened the last bolt. Another flash illuminated the horizon, and the roar of thunder followed almost immediately, shaking the ground beneath him. He cursed under his breath, knowing he had mere moments before the full brunt of the storm hit. He grabbed his toolkit and ran to the safety of his hut, the wind slamming against his back like a physical force. Inside, the small room offered little comfort. The walls were rough metal patched in several places, but at least they would keep him from being torn apart by flying debris. Hale slumped against the wall, catching his breath and listening to the storm rage outside. The hut shuddered with every gust, and the lightning painted flickering shadows across the walls. Then he heard it, a soft, almost delicate sound over the roar of the storm. Footsteps, careful and deliberate, approaching from the direction of the broken plains. Kale's hand instinctively went to the small laser pistol at his side, but he hesitated. Whoever, or whatever, was out there was moving like a predator, yet they didn't seem afraid. A sudden pounding at the door made Kale jump. He gripped the handle, ready to fire if necessary. But when he opened it, he saw not a threat, but a group of figures, soaked and shivering. They were women, heavily armed, their armor dark and sleek, designed for stealth and agility. Their faces were partially covered by hoods, but their eyes were sharp, intelligent, and alert. Kale blinked in surprise. "We need shelter," one of them said, her voice calm but firm. "Storm came too fast. We couldn't outrun it." Kale hesitated, taking in the sight. There were at least 5 of them, all carrying weapons that glinted even in the dim light of the hut. He could feel the tension radiating from them, a subtle, controlled energy that made him realize they were hunters, professional, dangerous, and not used to being refused anything. "All right," he said finally, stepping aside. "You can come in. Just be careful with the space." They entered dripping wet, shedding water onto the metal floor. One of them moved forward first, scanning the hut as if measuring its potential for defense. She had striking eyes, dark with a hint of amber, and Kale found himself unable to look away. She paused near him, her gaze lingering too long. "I saw him first," she whispered to another huntress nearby, barely audible over the storm. "Mine." Kale froze. The words were strange, almost possessive, and they made his stomach twist. He didn't know whether to feel threatened or confused. The huntresses ignored him for the moment, speaking in low tones and moving with the grace of predators, setting up their own small space within the hut. Solara, the apparent leader, turned toward Kale. Her voice was steady, commanding attention without being loud. "We mean no harm. We are hunters, tracking a creature that is dangerous."
"The storm forced us here. You will not regret sheltering us."
Kale nodded, still wary. "I hope you're telling the truth. Storms here aren't forgiving." The hut was small, and soon the air was thick with tension as everyone adjusted to the cramped space. Kale tried to focus on practical matters, checking his supplies, making sure nothing could short-circuit in the sudden wetness. But the huntresses were restless. They moved with purpose, unpacking small, advanced devices that Kale had never seen before, some for communication, others for tracking. One of them, Lyra, the one who had whispered earlier, kept glancing at him. At first, Kale thought it was curiosity, but the way her eyes followed him whenever he moved suggested something more. He tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the storm's fury outside. The hut rattled violently as a bolt of lightning struck somewhere nearby, sending a shiver through the floor. Kale couldn't help but ask. You said you were tracking something dangerous?
What is it?
Solara's expression darkened. A predator, unlike any we have faced before. It moves with the storm, feeds on energy. We thought we could trap it, but the weather, it's unpredictable. That's why we sought refuge here. Kale swallowed, realizing that the storm was not just natural. It was a cover, or perhaps even part of the creature's hunting ground. The thought made him uneasy, but he had no choice but to cooperate if he wanted to survive the night. Lyra, still watching him, stepped closer.
Don't worry, you'll see it soon enough,
she said softly, almost teasingly, her gaze never leaving him. Kale felt a strange mix of fear and fascination. He wasn't sure why her presence affected him so strongly. As the hours passed, the storm worsened. Rain hammered against the roof, wind howled like a living thing, and lightning illuminated the interior of the hut in harsh, flickering light. The Huntresses worked silently, their efficiency remarkable. Kale realized that despite their fierce demeanor, there was a rhythm to their actions, a kind of trust that they shared among themselves. He, however, was an outsider, a human among warriors whose lives revolved around danger and survival. He noticed small details, the way Lyra would subtly shift closer whenever he reached for something, or how she seemed to anticipate his movements. It was unnerving, yet there was a hint of vulnerability beneath her confident exterior, and Kale couldn't help but feel a strange connection forming, though he didn't understand why.
Outside, the storm raged on, and Kale began to hear sounds beyond the wind and rain.
Something moved in the distance, large, deliberate, almost intelligent. He caught glimpses of shadows in the lightning flashes, shapes that didn't match any normal animal of Claythar. 7. His pulse quickened. What? Solara noticed his unease. It's close, she said quietly. The storm hides it, but it hunts by energy. Lightning, sound, heat, it senses everything. Kale nodded, understanding the gravity of their situation. They were not just trapped by the storm. They were trapped with a predator that could use the storm itself as a weapon. The night stretched on, long and tense. The Huntresses took turns keeping watch, but their eyes often flicked toward Kale, as if assessing whether he would be an asset or a liability. Lyra, in particular, never strayed far. Kale could feel the unspoken competition among the women, each testing the other's boundaries while the storm raged outside. Despite the tension, Kale began to notice small moments of human connection. A shared glance over a cup of recycled water, a brief touch on the shoulder to steady someone slipping on the wet floor, the quiet camaraderie that formed in the face of danger. Even in this tiny hut, amidst strangers in a storm that could kill, there was a sense of fragile community forming. As dawn approached, the storm showed no sign of letting up. Lightning continued to crack across the sky, thunder shaking the hut to its foundations. Kyle sat back, exhausted but alert, realizing that the coming hours would test not just his endurance, but his understanding of these women who had entered his life so suddenly, so dramatically. And then Lyra's words echoed in his mind once more, soft but insistent. I saw him first. Mine. Kale didn't understand what she meant, but he felt the weight of it. It was a claim, a warning, and perhaps even a promise. The storm was not the only danger he faced tonight. The dynamics within this small group of Huntresses were as complex and unpredictable as the storm itself. The night stretched endlessly, filled with the sounds of wind, rain, and distant thunder. Kale knew that when the storm finally passed, or when the predator revealed itself, nothing would be the same. The hut, the Huntresses, and the human inside it were bound together by circumstance, fear, and the subtle, unspoken rules of survival. In the dim flicker of lightning, Kale realized one undeniable truth. This night would change him forever. And in the heart of the storm, he had already begun to understand that humans were capable of more than mere survival. They could shape the outcome of events that even the universe seemed to bend toward. The storm continued without mercy, rattling the hut and sending sheets of rain against its metal walls. Cale sat near the small, flickering lamp, watching the Huntresses move with careful precision. Despite the cramped space, each of them seemed to know exactly what to do. Solara had taken the corner near the door, keeping watch while others inspected their weapons and devices. Lyra remained near Cale, her eyes never leaving him, as if she were measuring his reactions, waiting for him to reveal some hidden weakness. Cale tried to focus on practical matters. He checked the solar panel rig again, making minor adjustments to ensure that the hut's power systems would not fail. The Huntresses glanced at him occasionally, their expressions unreadable. They spoke little, communicating mostly in gestures and low murmurs. Every now and then, Cale caught snippets of their words, coordinates, alien names, and tactical instructions, spoken in a language that was foreign to him. He wondered how they had become so skilled. Their movements were silent, yet deliberate. Every action had a purpose. Cale had trained himself to survive alone, but these women moved as a single unit, almost like a single mind spread across multiple bodies. There was efficiency in their motions, a fluidity that came from countless hunts and battles. Lyra shifted slightly, drawing Cale's attention. She tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him uneasy. "You're not afraid of storms," she said quietly, almost as if stating a fact rather than asking a question.
I've seen worse, Cale replied, trying to sound casual. Nature can be brutal, but I can handle it. Her lips curved into a small, knowing smile.
We'll see how you handle the storm when it's not just rain and wind," she murmured, turning back to her companions. Cale felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something in her tone, a hint of challenge, that made him pay closer attention to every sound outside the hut. The storm was more than weather. As the hours passed, Cale began to notice subtle movements in the shadows beyond the walls. Something large was moving, not randomly, but with purpose. Lightning revealed fleeting shapes in the distance, shapes too massive to be ordinary animals. His pulse quickened. Solara spoke without turning around.
It knows we are here.
It hunts by energy, heat, movement, even sound. Lightning gives it power.
That is why it follows us during storms.
So it's not just the storm we need to worry about? No, Solara said firmly. It is part of the storm. The thought made Cale uneasy. He had survived dangerous planets, but the idea of a predator that used the storm itself as camouflage was terrifying. He realized that he would have to rely on more than just his instincts. He would need ingenuity, improvisation, and the trust of the Huntresses to survive. The group settled into a tense rhythm. Cale worked on reinforcing the hut's weak spots while the Huntresses checked their equipment and shared low whispers among themselves. Occasionally, one of them would glance at him, a silent reminder that he was not merely a bystander. Lyra's gaze was constant, almost protective, in a possessive way, though he could not yet understand her intentions. Hours passed in this fragile tension. Cale noticed small things about the Huntresses that he found both fascinating and unnerving. One of them, Jera, carefully cleaned a compact weapon, her hands moving with precision and speed. Another, Tali, murmured instructions into a small communicator, her voice calm but urgent. Lyra remained close, shifting slightly whenever Cale moved, as though the space between them was a territory she would not allow anyone else to enter. Cale tried to make conversation, to distract himself from the oppressive tension of the storm, but the Huntresses were not forthcoming. Their words were measured, each phrase carrying layers of meaning. He learned a little about them, small glimpses of their pasts, tales of hunts on distant worlds, encounters with creatures that could tear a person apart in moments. The stories were thrilling, terrifying, and awe-inspiring. Despite the danger outside, Cale felt a strange connection forming. He admired their courage, their skill, and their efficiency. Yet, he also sensed an undercurrent of competition among them, a subtle tension that made every interaction charged with meaning. Lyra's earlier words echoed in his mind again. I saw him first. Mine. He did not fully understand what she meant, but he felt the weight of her claim, a mix of challenge and intent. As the night deepened, strange noises began to rise above the storm. At first, it was a subtle vibration through the floor, almost imperceptible. Then came scratching, faint at first, growing louder and more deliberate. Shadows flickered outside the small windows, shapes moving with an intelligence that set Cale's heart pounding. Solara's voice cut through the tension, calm but commanding. Prepare yourselves. It is close. Cale's mind raced. He had never seen such a creature, and he realized that the survival of everyone in the hut depended on his ability to think quickly. He began scanning the surroundings, looking for anything that could be used as a defensive measure. His eyes fell on the solar panels, still partially exposed to the storm. An idea began to form. Risky, dangerous, but perhaps the only chance they had. The Huntresses noticed his attention. Lyra stepped closer, her expression unreadable.
You think you can help us?
She asked softly, almost teasingly. Cale nodded. I might have an idea, but it will require coordination. Solara turned toward him, eyes narrowing.
Explain. Cale quickly outlined his plan, to use the energy from the storm captured through the solar panels to create a temporary electric barrier that could deter or incapacitate the predator.
The Huntresses listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to cautious approval. They could see that Cale's mind worked differently, less instinctive, more analytical. But they recognized the value in his idea. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Cale worked alongside the Huntresses, reinforcing weak points in the hut, connecting improvised conductors to the panels, and setting up a basic but potentially effective trap. Every movement had to be precise. The storm outside was unpredictable, and the predator was patient and intelligent. Lyra stayed close, helping where she could, but also watching Cale's every move. Cale began to understand her possessiveness, not just over him, but perhaps over the success of the plan itself. He felt a mix of irritation and fascination. She challenged him, but she also trusted him enough to allow him to take the lead. The hours dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Thunder shook the hut violently, and rain drove against the walls like knives. Every shadow, every sound outside made Cale's pulse quicken. The Huntresses maintained their vigilance, moving with silent coordination that spoke of years of training and experience. Then came a moment of quiet, brief but absolute. The storm seemed to pause, the wind holding its breath, and in that instant, Cale saw it. A massive silhouette moving just beyond the hut. Its form was difficult to define, shifting with the flashes of lightning, but there was no mistaking the intelligence in its movements. It was watching them, calculating, waiting for the right moment to strike. Cale swallowed hard, realizing that the storm was not the enemy. It was the predator's ally. Every bolt of lightning, every gust of wind enhanced its power. The realization made him more determined. He would have to act quickly, think creatively, and rely on the Huntress's skills to survive. Lyra's hand brushed against his arm as she leaned in to check one of the conductors. Cale looked at her, and for a moment, the storm, the predator, and the tension of the night seemed to fade. There was a strange intimacy in that brief contact, a silent acknowledgement of the connection forming between them, even in the heart of danger.
Solara's voice broke the moment.
It's coming! Be ready! Cale took a deep breath, steadying himself. The Huntresses readied their weapons, their movements synchronized, and Cale positioned himself near the improvised trap. The predator was out there, intelligent and powerful, but he had a plan, and for the first time, he felt that humans with their ingenuity and courage could stand toe-to-toe with even the deadliest of alien hunters. The storm roared back to life, louder and more violent than before.
Lightning flashed, illuminating the interior of the hut. Kale's heart raced as he prepared for the confrontation to come.
Outside, the shadows shifted again, closer this time, moving with a purpose that was chilling in its clarity. The night was far from over, and the true test of survival and trust was about to begin. In that moment, Kyle understood something profound. The storm and the predator were formidable, but humans had a weapon that even the most skilled hunters often underestimated: ingenuity, courage, and the ability to adapt. And as he glanced at the Huntresses around him, he realized that alliances could form in the most unlikely circumstances, and that sometimes, even in the heart of a deadly storm, connections could be forged that would last far longer than fear or danger. The storm raged like a living creature, slamming against the hut with relentless force. Rain tore across the metal roof, sending rivulets cascading down the walls. Kale's ears rang with the constant boom of thunder, and the flickering light from the storm cast the interior into shifting shadows. Every movement outside seemed magnified, and the tension inside the hut was almost unbearable. Solara moved quietly to the door, her body tense, muscles coiled like a predator ready to strike. Kyle watched her, marveling at her calm efficiency. He had always relied on his wits to survive, but these Huntresses moved with a precision born of years in life-and-death situations. They were a team in ways he had never experienced. The shadow outside shifted again, larger now, moving with a deliberate, intelligent grace. Lightning flashed, illuminating the form. A creature unlike any Kale had ever seen. Its body was massive, vaguely humanoid but distorted, with limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally. Its skin shimmered with electric energy, reflecting the lightning as if feeding from it. Its eyes glowed faintly, intelligent and calculating. The predator had arrived. Kale swallowed hard, his pulse racing. He glanced at the Huntresses, noting their silent communication. Solara's gaze met his, acknowledging the unspoken question. They had trained for creatures like this. But this one was different. The storm itself was part of the predator's hunting ground. Survival would require every ounce of skill, courage, and ingenuity. "Get ready," Solara whispered, her voice low but commanding. "It can sense fear."
"Stay calm and move with purpose." Kale nodded, positioning himself near the improvised trap he had set up using the solar panels.
He could feel the energy crackling around the hut, the storm feeding his potential weapon. Lyra hovered nearby, her eyes locked on him, watching his every move. Kale felt a strange mix of comfort and pressure from her presence. She trusted him enough to stay close, yet her possessiveness was palpable. A loud crash shook the hut as the predator slammed against the exterior wall, testing its defenses. Dust and splinters flew into the room, and Kale instinctively ducked, his heart pounding. The Huntresses responded instantly. Tali fired a small pulse weapon at the wall, creating a bright flash and loud crack that startled the creature. Jera moved to flank the predator, keeping it in the center of the hut. Kale's mind raced. The predator was intelligent, adapting quickly to their movements. He needed to act fast. He connected the final conductor from the solar panels to the energy trap, feeling the charge build. This was risky. The trap could backfire and harm everyone inside, but he had no other option. The predator struck again, smashing a section of the hut with unnatural strength. Kale felt the floor shake beneath him. Lightning arced dangerously close, illuminating the creature's electric energy and highlighting its massive claws. It was hunting, testing, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Kale took a deep breath, focusing on the trap. "Now!" he shouted, and Solara nodded, giving the signal for the coordinated attack. The Huntresses moved with swift precision. Lyra grabbed a small device from her belt and aimed it at the creature, sending a pulse of energy that distracted it momentarily. At the same time, Tali fired another shot to draw its attention. Kale completed the circuit, directing the energy from the storm through the trap. A surge of electricity shot outward, Illuminating the room with blinding light and a deafening crack, the predator roared, its form shimmering as it absorbed and resisted the energy. For a moment it seemed almost unstoppable, but Kale held firm, guiding the charge carefully to maximize its effect. The creature staggered, and the Huntresses pressed their advantage. Solara moved like a shadow, striking with precision, while Jera and Tali worked in tandem to corner it. Lyra stayed close to Kale, adjusting the trap's alignment with rapid movements. Kale realized that the humans and Huntresses were functioning as a single unit, each movement coordinated with instinct and trust. The predator recovered quickly, swinging its massive limbs and sending a shockwave through the hut. Kyle was thrown to the side, hitting the floor hard, but he scrambled up, refusing to give in to panic. He adjusted the conductors, redirecting the energy in a tighter arc. The creature roared again, more in frustration than pain, and Kale saw an opening. Solara nodded to him. It was now or never. Kale took a calculated risk, sending a concentrated pulse directly at the predator. The creature shrieked, a sound that made Kale's teeth ache, and staggered backward, temporarily stunned. Lightning flashed outside, and the storm seemed to respond, amplifying the energy around them. Kale felt a rush of triumph, but knew it was far from over. The predator was intelligent. It would not be defeated so easily. He glanced at the Huntresses, noting the same determination reflected in their eyes. They were relentless, and together they had a chance. Lyra moved close, brushing past him as she repositioned another device.
"You did well," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the storm.
Kale felt a strange warmth at her words, a mixture of relief and pride. She wasn't just possessive. She respected him, recognized his courage and ingenuity. The battle continued, each movement critical. The predator smashed a section of the hut, sending debris flying, but the Huntresses adapted, using their agility to stay out of reach. Kale guided the energy trap with precision, exploiting every momentary weakness in the creature's movements. Together they forced it back, cornering it against the reinforced section of the wall. Finally, with a coordinated strike, the predator faltered. Kale sent one last surge of electricity through the trap, amplifying the storm's power. The creature roared, a final, defiant sound, and collapsed, its massive body twitching as it lost the energy that fueled it. The room fell silent, except for the crackling of residual electricity and the fading roar of the storm. Kale sank to the floor, exhausted, his hands trembling. The Huntresses gathered around, checking each other quickly, ensuring no one was injured. Solara gave a brief nod of approval, and Kale felt a surge of pride. They had survived together. Lyra stayed close, her expression unreadable but softer than before.
"You were right," she said quietly. "Humans."
You can surprise even the best of us. Kale smiled weakly, still catching his breath. I guess I had a good team. The storm began to subside, leaving a quiet tension in its wake. Rain still fell, but the wind had softened, and the thunder was distant. Outside the plains of Clythar, Breen. 7 were scarred from the storm's fury, but inside the hut, a fragile sense of relief settled over the group. Hello looked at the Huntresses, noting the respect in their eyes. They were fierce, capable, and deadly, yet they had acknowledged his contribution. He realized something profound. Survival was not just about strength or skill. It was about ingenuity, adaptability, and the ability to work together. Lyra's gaze lingered on him, a subtle challenge softened by admiration.
"You're different," she said softly. "Not like the others we've hunted with."
You think, you adapt, you survive. And Kale nodded, feeling a connection he hadn't expected. I've had to, he admitted. Being alone teaches you a lot about the world and yourself. Solara approached, placing a firm hand on his shoulder.
You've earned your place here tonight, she said.
Not by strength alone, but by courage and wit. Remember that.
The galaxy doesn't give second chances. Kale felt a swell of pride, tempered by exhaustion.
The night had tested him in ways he could never have imagined, and he had emerged not just alive, but respected by warriors who had faced death countless times. As the storm faded completely, leaving a pale light to illuminate the damaged hut, Kale realized something important. The predator was gone, but the experience had changed him. Humans could survive in ways that others often underestimated. His ingenuity, his calm under pressure, and his ability to adapt had turned the tide of the night. The Huntresses gathered their equipment, checking weapons and devices before preparing to depart. Lyra lingered, her expression softening. She placed a hand briefly on Kale's arm, a silent acknowledgement of their shared ordeal. "We'll meet again?" she said, her voice low but certain. Kale nodded, understanding that this encounter was only the beginning. The galaxy was full of dangers, but humans had something unique, the ability to think, to adapt, and to turn even the deadliest situations to their advantage. The Huntresses exited into the damp light of dawn, leaving Kale standing in the quiet aftermath. The storm had passed, the predator was defeated, and the hut was damaged but still standing. Kale looked out across the plains, the sky slowly brightening, and felt a strange sense of calm. He had survived the night, learned the value of trust and teamwork, and earned the respect of warriors unlike any he had known. As he began repairs on the hut, Kale reflected on the night's events. He had faced the storm, faced the predator, and faced the unknown, with nothing but his mind and determination. And in the heart of danger, he had discovered something more. The resilience of humanity, the ingenuity that set them apart, and the bonds that could form even in the most unlikely circumstances. The dawn was quiet. The storm finally spent, but Kale knew the universe was far from safe. Yet, for the first time, he felt ready. He had survived the storm and earned his place in the galaxy, not just as a human, but as someone who could make a difference in a universe that demanded courage, intelligence, and heart. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside drenched and quiet. Rain still fell in gentle sheets, but the violent wind and deafening thunder were gone. Kale stepped outside his hut, breathing in the fresh, damp air. The plains of Clithar, 7, stretched out before him, scarred by lightning strikes and flattened debris. It was a planet that demanded respect, and the night had reminded him how fragile life could be, even for someone who had learned to survive alone. The Huntresses were already gathering their equipment. Their armor, once sleek and precise, was now battered, streaked with mud and rain. Despite their exhaustion, there was a sense of pride and accomplishment in the way they moved. They had survived the storm, defeated a predator that had used the storm itself as a weapon, and lived to tell the tale. And Kale, a human who had been nothing more than a stranger to them just a night ago, had become a vital part of their success. Solara approached him, her expression calm but serious. "You've done well," she said, "not by strength alone, but by thought and courage. That is something even the most skilled hunters sometimes lack." Kale nodded, feeling a sense of pride he hadn't experienced in a long time. "I just did what I had to," he replied.
"The storm! The creature! It was all a test, I guess."
Solara allowed herself a small smile.
Life is always a test, Kale. You passed this one, and you've proven that humans are not as fragile as some might believe.
Ingenuity and courage can be as powerful as muscle or skill. Kale glanced at Lyra, who had lingered nearby, cleaning and inspecting her devices. She caught his eye and raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk tugging at her lips. Her possessiveness from the previous night had softened into something more complex. Respect, perhaps even admiration. Kyle felt a strange warmth in response, but he said nothing, focusing instead on the quiet aftermath around them. The predator lay defeated in the distance, its massive, electric-infused body motionless. Kale had seen enough of the creature to know it had been powerful and intelligent. It could have destroyed them all if not for quick thinking, coordination, and his improvised energy trap. The victory was not just physical. It was a triumph of human ingenuity and determination, qualities that even the elite Huntresses could not ignore. The group began dismantling their temporary shelter. The hut, though damaged, was still standing, a testament to Kale's skills and the storm's partial mercy. He worked alongside the Huntresses, securing what remained and salvaging equipment that could still be used. Lyra stayed close, moving with him in silent synchronization. Their interactions were no longer tense. They had shared the crucible of survival, and an unspoken bond had formed. Solara gathered the group for a final check. "We leave soon," she said. "The storm has passed, but this planet is still dangerous. We must move before nightfall." Kale nodded, understanding the urgency. He had survived this night, but Clythar, Seven would continue to challenge anyone who lingered. His eyes swept across the plains, noting the scars left by the storm and the predator. Nature was unforgiving, and yet humans had a unique way of turning adversity into advantage. That had been proven here, in the heart of the storm. As they prepared to depart, Lyra approached Kale once more. "You did more than survive," she said softly. "You helped us win. That is not something many humans could do." Kale shrugged, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I didn't do it alone. You all fought brilliantly. I just found a way to tip the balance." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, Kale noticed the depth of her gaze. "You're not like the others," she said. "You think, you adapt, you endure. That is rare. That is why I said what I did last night." Kale's mind flicked back to her words in the darkness. "I saw him first. Mine." He had not understood them then, but now he saw the layers of meaning. Possession, perhaps, but also recognition of skill, courage, and compatibility. It was a claim tempered by respect, not arrogance. The Huntresses mounted their transport, sleek hover vehicles designed for speed and agility across the harsh terrain. Kale helped secure their equipment, making sure everything was in order. Solara gave him a final nod. "You've proven humanity can match experience and skill with intelligence and adaptability. Remember that, Kale. You have the potential to change outcomes where others might fail." Kale watched them leave, the hum of their engines fading into the distance. A part of him felt a strange emptiness. He had spent so long alone, surviving on his own ingenuity, and now he realized the power of connection. Even temporary alliances could be transformative, and trust could form in the most unlikely places. He stood in the middle of the damaged plains, feeling the wind gently brush against his face, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to smile. He had survived a storm that could have killed him, faced a predator that seemed unbeatable, and earned the respect of interstellar hunters. Humans were fragile in some ways, but resilient, inventive, and surprisingly strong in ways that others underestimated. Kale began the slow task of repairing his hut. Each nail, each panel, each improvised fix reminded him that survival was ongoing work, not a single victory. He also reflected on what he had learned from the Huntresses. Discipline, precision, teamwork, and courage under pressure. Their skills had been honed over countless encounters, but he had contributed something unique, the creativity and adaptability that only a human mind could bring. Hours passed, and the plains began to glimmer in the early sunlight. Lightning scars glinted in the puddles of rainwater, reflecting the beauty and danger of the planet. Kyle walked slowly across the plains, examining the remnants of the predator's trail and the signs of the storm. He understood now that survival was not just about fighting. It was about observation, strategy, and learning from every encounter. Lyra's words echoed in his mind. "You think, you adapt, you endure. Kale realized they were not just compliments. They were an acknowledgement of what it meant to be human in a galaxy filled with danger. Humans could endure storms, predators, and impossible odds, and through ingenuity, courage, and cooperation, they could emerge victorious. As the day progressed, Kale prepared for the next storm, knowing that Clythar, 7, would test him again. Yet he felt ready. He was no longer just a lone survivor. He had proven that humans could stand alongside even the most elite hunters and survive. He carried with him a quiet confidence, a knowledge that his mind and will could shape outcomes where strength alone might fail. Kale returned to his hut, reinforcing the walls and patching the roof. Each repair was a testament to survival, a reminder that humans could endure and adapt. As he worked, he reflected on the Huntresses' visit, their respect, and the bonds formed under pressure. Even though they had departed, their influence lingered, teaching him lessons he would carry into every challenge to come. By evening, the plains were calm. The storm's fury was gone, replaced by a gentle rain that washed the damage clean. Kale stood at the door of his hut, looking out across the horizon, and felt a profound sense of peace. The night had tested him beyond what he had thought possible, but he had survived. He had adapted, learned, and proven that humans could endure where others might falter. Lyra's parting words returned to him one last time. "We'll meet again." Kale smiled at the thought. Perhaps they would. Perhaps the universe was vast and dangerous, but humanity had a place in it, not just as survivors, but as innovators, problem solvers, and beings capable of rising to challenges that others could not. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, Kale felt a quiet pride. The storm was gone, the predator defeated, and the night's trials behind him. He had survived. He had learned. Kyle returned inside the hut, sitting quietly and letting the gentle rain soothe his weary body. The night had tested more than his strength. It had tested his courage, his ingenuity, and his capacity to trust others. And in that crucible, he had discovered something essential. Humans were capable of extraordinary things, not just in survival, but in the ability to adapt, endure, and shape their own destiny. The plains were silent, but Kale knew the universe was full of challenges yet to come, and he was ready for them. Not just as a lone human, but as someone who had learned the power of intelligence, courage, and collaboration. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, he understood something profound. Humanity was not just enduring, it was thriving, capable of leaving a mark on a universe that often underestimated it. Kale took a deep breath, letting the calm of the moment fill him. He looked at the repaired hut, the plains, and the slowly clearing sky, and felt a sense of certainty. The storm had passed, the predator had been defeated, and he had survived, not just by chance, but by skill, courage, and determination. Humanity had prevailed in its quiet, resilient way, and Kale knew that whatever came next, he was ready. The night was over, the dawn had arrived, and with it, the promise of a future shaped not by fear, but by human ingenuity, resilience, and courage. Kale stepped forward into that future, knowing that he had proven something important. Humans were a force to be reckoned with, even in a galaxy filled with storms, predators, and uncertainty. And for the first time in a long time, he felt truly at peace.